Hi, this is Sue Jackson of the Book by Book blog, and I'm here with my Friday reads. But I thought I'd do things a little bit different today. I am outside. Now, I've tried recording out on the deck before, and it's pretty buggy. We've got these little gnats that you don't see them until you're covered in bites. So I thought I'd try here in the screened porch. It's actually cool, what we're calling cool this summer. It's about 11 in the morning and it's only up to about 80 so far. The humidity is down to about 75%, which is good. And it's supposed to come down further. The weekend's supposed to be beautiful here, finally, after weeks and weeks of like 90 to 95 degrees and very humid every day. So anyway, that's why I'm outside. I couldn't bear to go back inside. I actually came out this morning to finish the Overstory. And that's why this setting is especially relevant and appropriate for today. I am down to the last few pages of the Overstory by Richard Powers, and I felt like I needed to be outside to finish this book. It's all about trees, so I'm out on our deck. It's not too horribly hot yet, and I'm surrounded by trees. This just feels like a fitting way to finish this book. So I don't normally read in the morning. I read every single day before bed and before my nap, which is a necessity because of my illness. But last night it was already 11 o'clock, which is super, super late for me. And I was like determined to finish this. As I told my husband, it felt like every night I was like, okay, this is the night I'm going to finish it. And then there were still pages left. It is a pretty long book, and the pages are pretty dense. But it is Big Book Summer after all, and that's why I saved this book for summer. Plus the fact that it's all about trees and nature and the outdoors. So I think this is probably the fourth week I've talked about this. The book did take longer to read than I expected, but it's been wonderful. So I think I'm going to go with just a quick overview of the Overstory today. It's a very unique book. It's a novel, and it's divided into parts like the parts of a tree. So roots, trunk, the crown, and finally seeds. And the first part, roots, reads like a series of separate short stories. And each story is about a person, a particular person, often within a family. But there are trees as an essential element of every story. So, for instance, the first story is about a man back in the early 20th century, an immigrant who moved from Brooklyn, New York, out to Iowa with his new wife. He brought with him some chestnuts that he planted. So Iowa was like all flat. They bought 5 acres for a farm, completely flat, no trees around. And at that time, New York and Brooklyn were covered with trees. So he really missed the trees. He planted his own chestnut. And the story follows his generations of his family, his children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren, and on, as this chestnut grows. So the family grows as the chestnut grows. It's almost a symbol of their family as it branches out. And it's a beautiful story. It's about a family, but also about a tree. So that first section with the short stories is very much like that. And then, and they seem unconnected. They're all in the US, but they take place in different parts of the country. Different kinds of people from different backgrounds. But they all have this thing in common, that at some point in their lives, perhaps just as children, but at some point, there was a tree or trees that made an impact on their lives. Now, in the second part of the novel, The Trunk, is when all these different characters from the separate stories come together with a common purpose. And that purpose is to save the trees. And they each come at this in different ways. Some, you would never think that this is what they'd end up doing. But through various circumstances, they all end up coming together in the Pacific Northwest to try to save some of the old growth forests that are being clear cut by lumber companies. Because of loopholes in the law, the clear cutting's just moving forward, even though it's kind of illegal. And anyway, there's a lot of detail in there, but the focus is on the people and on the trees throughout this wonderful novel. In that third section, The Crown, these people who have come together now scatter again. It's not a real rosy picture of what's going on in our world right now, of climate change, of what's happening to the trees and other parts of nature. It is kind of a grim picture, as it is in real life. But then the final section is called Seeds. And it kind of pulls things together and even perhaps looks a little bit into the future to show how humans might destroy things, but the world without humans will come back. So it's that's kind of the overall arc. But as I said, there are all these individual characters. You get to know them very well. It's wonderful character development. The plot is twisty and at times suspenseful. There's just a lot that happens in this book with the people and with the trees. And it is just a beautiful, powerful, very unique novel. So even though it took me almost a month to read, I loved The Overstory by Richard Powers. So now this brings me to a little bit of a conundrum. Because it's already August 11th, The Overstory did take longer to read than I expected it to. And even though I never finished my whole stack of big books, there are some others that I hoped to get to. So this is all that's left of my stack of big books that I started with back in May. And I've only got a little over 3 weeks left until the first Monday in September is when the Big Book Summer Challenge ends. So I had planned to spend all of August reading Voyager by Diana Gabaldon, book 3 in the Outlander series. I've been waiting for ages to get to this. It is an enormous book. It is 870 pages, and this is a very large format paperback, as you can see, with really densely packed print. I know, and I knew from the beginning that this book would take at least a month to read, and I'm kind of running out of time. I think I'm going to have to set it aside. Maybe even wait until next summer. We'll see. So that leaves me with a Stephen King book, Hearts in Atlantis, and a John Grisham book, Sycamore Row. Really wanted to get to both of these. I think I'm going to read the Stephen King. I've got about 25 days left of Big Book Summer, and this one really, well, it's a good crossover book, which is what I usually look for in my last big book of the summer. So you may be wondering, what does it matter if, like Voyager, took me half of September to read? Well, here's the thing. It doesn't matter, of course. But I do like seasonal reading. And I really look forward to the RIP Challenge, which is in September and October. So the idea of the RIP Challenge is simply to read sort of darker books for the fall. Mysteries, thrillers, suspense, ghost stories. I mean, anything a little darker, creepier, suspenseful, that kind of thing. So since Big Book Summer runs until Labor Day in the US, which is the first Monday in September, it overlaps with the RIP Challenge, which starts September 1st. So I like to have a crossover book, and I think this one will work. I think I can finish it by the end of Big Book Summer. I think it's September 5th this year. And it's one I've been dying to read for a long time, Hearts in Atlantis. And it is suspenseful, and I mean, it's Stephen King, but it's not horror. This one is a little more, it's a unique book in that it's a series of short stories and one novella that sort of all fit together. So I think this will be my next book that I'll start at nap time today. And finally, I am listening to a big book on audio, and that is Like a Love Story by Abdi Nazemian. I still don't know if I'm getting that name correct or not. But this is a YA novel, so something a little different for me, and I'm really enjoying it. It's a beautiful novel. It is set in 1989, New York City. It focuses on 3 teenagers. So Art is the only out gay boy in his high school. He is out and proud. He's very flamboyant. He comes to school the first day of, I think it's senior year, with his hair cut in a mohawk and dyed lavender. So, Art is proud of who he is, but in the 80s, this was a very difficult position to be in. He undergoes a lot of bullying, gets beaten up. I mean, it's horrible, really. But Art has decided he needs to be who he is. Now, Reza, on the other hand, his family has just moved to New York. They're from Iran, and they lived for a while in Toronto. And New York's a big adjustment for him. And of course, New York in 1989, the big news there was the AIDS crisis, which was killing thousands of gay men. I mean, across the whole world, millions, but particularly New York was one center both of the disease and of activism. And Art's very involved in the activism. Reza thinks he might be gay, doesn't really want to admit it to himself. It goes against his cultural upbringing. Sounds like a leaf blower just started up nearby. I was worried about this. I hope you can't hear it. I hope it does. It's not too distracting. Anyway, so Reza hasn't really admitted even to himself that he's gay, but he begins to come to that realization while he's in New York. So he's kind of just the opposite of Art. But he meets Art on the first day of school. They really hit it off. And Art's best friend, Judy, is the third main character here. Judy and Art have been best friends since they were little kids. They get along really well. Judy's kind of a loner at school other than Art. She weighs a little more than the other girls do. She is really into fashion and making her own clothes, so she dresses beautifully but very different from the other girls. So Judy and Art have been best friends. Now Reza comes along. Judy gets a huge crush on Reza. And since, even as he's accepting that maybe he does like men, what's going on around him in New York is just too frightening. He is terrified that being gay is a death sentence. And so he convinces himself that he can be a normal guy. So he actually starts dating Judy. So of course this sets up all kinds of problems. There's one other, the kids' parents are all a part of the story, but there's one other character who's almost a main character, and that's Judy's Uncle Stephen. And he is a gay man, an adult gay man in New York. He does have AIDS and he's dying. His partner has already died. Judy and Art are both very close to Stephen, and Reza gradually gets to know him. Stephen is the reason why Judy and Art are both involved in ACT UP, the biggest AIDS activism group at the time. So I have no idea how far along I am in this book, but I'm really enjoying it. That's Like a Love Story by Abdi Nazamian. And that's it for this week. I would love to hear what you're reading. Please let me know in the comments down below. And I've got just a very short video clip I'll put on the end here of out on the deck what the woods behind our house looks like in honor of the overstory. Just leaving you with some beautiful trees. So I was just sitting in my lounge chair inside the screened porch, and I heard this big crash. Apparently a tree fell down back here somewhere, but as you can see, we've got really thick forest back here. So I just wanted to share this, especially since I just finished that book. It's a novel, it's about people, but it's also about trees, very much about trees and their role in our world. Just a beautiful, stunning, moving novel. So this is our lovely, we've got a little bit of yard and then mostly forest back here, which is just really nice. Some of these are dogwoods that bloom in the spring. There's our kids' old fort. They're in their 20s now, so with the moss on the roof, it's starting to look like kind of like a hobbit house or something. There is a trail back there that you can hardly see anymore. Everything's a little overgrown, but we've still got some huge trees back here. And hopefully you can hear the birds. Being outdoors just restores me.